Hello everyone and welcome to Minnie and Me. My name is Miss Katie and this is a free online painting tutorial offered by Garden City Arts with the help of our amazing sponsors. So today we are painting a cute little Christmas penguin to get ready for Christmas. Now I'm going to walk you through this painting step by step. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do the step that we're on. Then at the end, I will put up on the screen a picture of that cute little penguin on one side and the step that we're on the other side, the step that you need to complete to move on to the next step. Okay, so then you can pause the screen if you need to catch up, or you can just keep going to the next step. Now, we have these painting kits that we offer throughout the month of December. You can go online and order those, and I give you all of the paint that you need in those painting kits, and they are numbered 1 through 6. So go ahead, if you have a painting kit, lay those out on your foam plate. If you don't have a painting kit, no worries, just grab these colors. This is what you'll need to paint your penguin. Also inside your painting kit is a piece of chalk, a cup for cup water. Go ahead and make sure you get your cup full or about halfway full, and a few paper towels. Now, what's not in your kit would be the brushes. Make sure that you have a wash brush. Wash brushes are big and they have flat tops. You need a shader brush. They look like the wash brushes except they're teeny tiny, and a round brush. Okay, any size is just fine. Whatever you have on hand will work. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we're gonna move right into step number 1. Now, step number 1 involves 2 colors. We're gonna use color number 1, which is ultramarine blue for the background, and then we're gonna use color 2, which is titanium white for his little mound of snow that he's gonna be sitting on. Okay, so I'm gonna use my biggest brush for this step. Okay, very first thing you want to do is you want to dip your paintbrush in paint water, and I'm going to tap it on the rim of the can and pat it dry. Now, you do this with every time you use a brush for the first time. You never want to use a dry brush, you want to use a slightly damp brush, okay? I'm going to also go through how to make lines, and I'm going to do that on my canvas right now. Now, this isn't something that you need to do on your canvas. This is just something that you need to watch for a moment. I'm going to talk to you about how to hold your brush and how to get different effects, okay? So, first things first, let's talk about what happens when you put lots of water into your paint. When I take water and a little bit of paint and mix it on my palette, so I'm mixing the water into the paint, making the paint more runny. What happens is that paint gets more runny, of course, and it also gets lighter, okay, and more transparent. Transparent means you can see through it. So when I put it on my canvas, do you see how I can see through it? Some of the blue of your canvas is popping through it, okay? So I'm going to put on a nice layer of this paint all the way across the background. So the top of my canvas going all the way to almost the very bottom. And I'm going to hold my brush at its widest point when I go up and down, okay? And again, when you mix water into your paint, this is what it looks like. It's very wet, very wet, of course, but very thin and very see-through. Now, let me show you what happens when you use just straight paint and no water. Do you see how it's dry, it's kind of scratchy, it kind of grabs at the canvas, and it's also very thick in places so that you can't see it. It's also not very even. We want it a little bit more even. So if you have a spot on your canvas that looks like that, what you can do is take your brush, take a little bit extra water and mix it in your paint, and then go back over that spot before it dries. and you can soften that up. Okay, I'm gonna quickly cover up my background. Now this is just like the background, like the night sky. We're just making it look like it's twilight, so it's not bright day. And I am just gonna cover this in very quickly. Do you see how I'm doing really big strokes? No short, choppy ones. Do really long, continuous strokes. So what I mean by that is I'm never picking up my brush from my canvas. I'm going from the top all the way to almost the bottom. Now, once you're happy with the background, we can move on. So go ahead and do this really fast. Okay, and then I'm going to show you another way of how to hold your brush, and that's something that you'll need to watch for a minute, and then you can do too. Okay, also when we're cleaning out our brush, we want to swirl it in the paint water, we want to tap it on the rim of the can, and then we want to pat it dry. Swirl, tap, and dry makes your brush nice and clean, and it also gives it the right amount of moisture. If your brush is, don't throw your brush. If your brush is very wet, it can sometimes cause problems on your canvas. Okay, so really fast, let's talk about how to use your brush in a different way. I'm putting a lot of white paint, maybe just mixing a teensy weensy bit of water into it, on the very top of my brush. And I'm going to use the very top instead of the side, and I'm going to use it at its thinnest point. So do you see if I turn it a certain way, it gets very thin? I am going to put it on my canvas, and I'm going to draw out a hill using the top edge of my brush. Okay, so I have my brush standing almost straight up, and I can draw lines when I do that. Now, after you have a line drawn for your hill, you can then come back in and grab a little bit more paint, and then use the side of your brush, just like we did earlier. Start right at that line and start bringing the paint down all the way to the bottom. We're making a little snow mound for our penguin to sit on. Okay, thanks for watching. You can go ahead and get started on your snow mound. And I'm gonna go ahead and quickly finish up this mound, and then we'll move on. And I'll put up on the screen the step that you need to complete before you can move on. Now you might notice that some of my blue and my white is mixing together. I like that. That's okay, because snow isn't always just straight white. Sometimes snow looks like it's kind of has like shadows, and the way you get that is to add a little bit of blue to it. Snow on shadows actually has a bluish color. So there's my shadow. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and swirl, tap, and dry my brush and move on to the next step. All right, we're ready for step number 2. Now, before you can start step number 2, you need to make sure that your canvas is completely dry. So if you have any shiny areas, that might mean that your paint is still wet. So what I do is I always do the touch test. If anything comes off on your finger, then it's still wet. So you'll have to wait a little bit. Now, once your canvas is dry, you can start drawing out your penguin. That is what we're doing in this step. You are going to draw with chalk. I am going to draw with Sharpie on paper so that you can see it a little bit better on the video screen. So, even though I'm drawing on Sharpie, I want to pretend like I am drawing this penguin the right size on my canvas. So, we have a little hill right here that our penguin is on. Pretend like this is all a snow mound and this is all sky. I want to make not an itty bitty widow's penguin, but I want to make a pretty big one that fills in the canvas. So I'm going to start by making sure that my penguin is pretty wide. And I'm going to start with some dots. I'm going to start fairly up high, not all the way to the top, but kind of on, if we were to divide our canvas into thirds, probably be right on that 1/3 line. And I'm going to put little dots, and this is going to be how wide his or her head is. Then I'm going to decide how wide his bottom is going to be. Now, his head is going to be a little bit wider than his bottom. So I'm going to come down here and put dots that are wider apart than these up here. I'm going to make them about this big. And do you see my hill line? I want to make sure that my penguin's bottom is below that hill line, okay? Now, to make our body of our penguin, we're going to do a curvy line connecting these two. Now, guess what? I have to draw a Santa hat in a bit, so I'm just going to do a dashed line so you guys can get the idea of what this line is going to look like, okay? And then I'm going to do a bowl, okay? So this one was a hill. It goes up and curves upwards. My bowl is going to curve downwards. I'm going to connect these two lines with a little bowl. Then I'm going to connect these dots, and if your dots are wider at the bottom than they are at the top, it's going to make a diagonal line. I'm going to connect this one to this one. There's my diagonal line. Okay, now next I'm going to put the details inside for his body. Now the details to me look kind of like a loaf of bread. Okay, so I'm going to start at his forehead. I'm going to put a dot that's about halfway in between the two sides of my penguin, and I'm going to put it fairly close to the top of his head, not all the way, right about there. Okay, now I'm going to make two big curvy lines that come out and then come a little bit more inwards. Okay, so I'm going to put some dots to help me for my references, okay, so I know where I'm going. So there's a dot in the middle. I'm going to come out and I'm going to make what looks kind of like a mountain and put two little dots for where the curve is going to be. Now I'm going to make a really, really big hill. It's going to start right here and it's going to go all the way to the dot. Do you see that? Almost looks like the letter C. And then I'm going to do that again on the other side, just like that. Next, we're going to take these dots and we're going to bring them all the way to his body. Well, we're going to start at the dot and we're going to go all the way down to his body. And I'm going to make this a nice curvy line. It's going to curve outwards. And there you have it, my slice of bread inside my penguin. Okay, so I have my body done. Remember this dotted line, you can draw that in solid. You can erase with chalk. I can't. Permanent marker doesn't erase. That's why I did the dotted line. Next, I'm going to come down to his feet. Now, his feet have 3 points. The point in the middle comes down a little bit lower. So I'm going to do 1 point, that's one toe, and then a dot lower, that's another toe, and then a dot back up high. Okay? When I connect these, it looks like the letter V. Then I connect those back to the body, and I have a little teeny tiny foot for my penguin. Okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So 3 V's, well, 3 dots that make a V, connect those lines, and then connect the V back to the body. Try to make your feet even. I should have made my feet the same size. Next, we're going to do the flippers. Now, the flippers are super easy. Do you remember how our curvy lines curved back into this point? We're going to start right at that point and come out with a diagonal line going away from the body. Then we bring that diagonal line back into the body with a nice curvy line, a nice little bowl. I'm going to do the other side exactly the same. And now our penguin has flippers and feet. Okay, now this is just a regular penguin at this point. We're also not going to do any details of the face yet. We'll do that later. Instead, we need to make this regular penguin into a Christmas penguin by giving him a really cute Santa hat. This Santa hat is a little bit big on this penguin, so we're going to make sure it's nice and fluffy and big, okay? I'm going to come to the top of my penguin's head, and I'm going to start right at that dot for the top of his head, And I'm going to make a really big curvy line going up and away. If I do it on the other side, it looks like the letter C. Then I'm going to end my C's with another line. When I do this, it looks kind of like he has this weird hat on. This is the brim of our Santa hat, okay? Next, I'm gonna make a little fluffy ball for the end of Santa's hat. And I'm gonna come right about here and make a fluffy ball that disappears and goes behind my penguin. Now I need to connect the brim of the hat to the fluffy part, okay? So I'm going to start with a nice curvy line. It's going to be a curvy line that goes all the way up and across and connects to the ball. So here we go. Whoop, just like that. Now back at the other side, the right-hand side of the rim, I'm going to make a little line for the crease in Santa's hat. And then I'm going to make sure that this red hat goes all the way there. Just like that. Okay, we have our penguin drawn out and we're ready to move on. Now my hat was really big. If you don't like your big hat, that's why you draw in chalk, because you can erase. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my canvas. My canvas is now nice and dry, and I'm going to draw with chalk, doing exactly what I did here. You should already have that. And then we'll move on to step number 3. All right, remember, if you make a mistake with your chalk, guess what? Unlike the permanent marker that I was using, you can take a clean damp brush and you can wash it right off, okay? Clean damp brush, scratch it back and forth, and the chalk comes right off. Okay, go ahead and draw your penguins. All right, we should have our Christmas penguin all drawn out on our canvas and ready to be painted. We're going to start with color number 2, which is titanium white, and we're going to grab a shader brush or a round brush, whichever you prefer. I like shader brushes personally. I'm going to dip it in paint water and pat it dry to get it primed and ready to go. And then I'm going to show you how to outline and then fill in. So I'm going to go right along my chalk lines with the top edge of my brush. Do you remember how we outlined our hill at the very beginning? Now remember, if your paint is dry and scratchy, like I showed you what happens when you use just straight paint, make sure you take a little bit of paint and a little bit of water and mix it together to make it nice and fluid. I'm going to outline my loaf of bread inside my penguin, and then I'm going to turn my attention to the Santa hat. That's the other white part of our penguin. Okay, the rim of my Santa hat is white. Now I can use these short little brush strokes, and what will happen is it'll feel more fluffy. We want a nice fluffy Santa hat, so it doesn't have to be clean and perfect, okay? And then we're going to do the ball of our Santa hat. So once you have those outlined, you then can use the side of your brush to fill it in. If you are an experienced painter, you could even use a bigger brush if you need to, okay? So let's pretend like I got all of this white filled in. Like I'm just a super fast painter and I just whizzed through this and got the whole thing, the loaf of bread inside the penguin, the Santa hat, and the ball all filled in no time flat. Okay, that's what you'll want to do. When you have yours filled in, you swirl it half and dry your brush, and then you move on to your black, okay? Black is your color number 3, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to outline, and when you start outlining and blocking out where your black is, you have to come right up to where you left off with the white, okay? If you are just covering up a chalk line, then you don't have to worry so much. Just cover the chalk line and you're good. But if there's white instead of a chalk line that you have to meet, make sure you go right up to the white paint, okay? So you're going to outline all parts of your penguin, so that's left, which would be the body and the arms. You're going to outline right along the white, the loaf of bread, and then once you have that done, you fill it in solid. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video at this point, and I'm going to go ahead and catch up. That way you don't have to watch me paint. And I'm going to fill in my penguin solid white first, the loaf of bread, the rim of the hat, and the poof ball. And then I'm going to outline and fill in solid black paint the rest of his body and his arms. Okay, go ahead and paint away. All right, we are going to use colors 4 and 5 next, which is going to be red and orange. And I bet you know which we're going to use for what. Okay, so with our red paint, we're going to go ahead and paint in our Santa hat. Now, sometimes I will flip my penguin upside down so that I can easily reach different parts of the hat. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to outline my Santa hat. And remember, if it's just covering up chalk, no problem. You don't have to worry about anything. You just cover up the chalk. But if you are getting close to the white or the black, make sure you go all the way up to it. Don't leave any space in between. And I'm going to paint this in solid red. Now you'll notice that your red looks really, really dark, way darker than it looks in on the palette. That's because when we are painting on a dark surface, it can make colors look a little darker, and that's okay. We'll do 2 layers, okay? So I'm just doing a single layer, and I'm gonna let it dry. And then I'm gonna do a layer of orange paint for my feet. Now, orange is very transparent because it is primarily yellow, and yellow paint is the most transparent paint on the color wheel. He's kind of the wuss. He's very see-through. So I'm going to do a layer of the orange, and then I'll come back and do a second layer after that first layer is dry. So I'm just going to really quickly outline and then fill in. And make sure that your paint is nice and smooth. Don't let any bumps appear, okay? Smooth out all that paint. And now I have to kind of play hurry up and wait. I have to just let this dry for a little bit and then come back in and do another layer. So let's pretend like my hat is dry. I'm just going to use extra paint, and I'm going to put just a little bit of red paint wherever I feel like it's going to be the lightest. So on the top of the hat. Down low, I don't have to worry so much about it because that's going to be a little bit darker. Okay, so top of the hat is solid red paint. The rest of the hat can be a little bit see-through and darker. Okay, I'll do another layer of orange on his feet, and then he will be done and ready to go. We'll move on to the next step. Okay, this next step involves color number 6. Now, this is the step where we're going to put in some details, okay? We're going to put in some shadows. We're going to add a few little details. We might even jump back to black occasionally. And we're going to make this penguin look really cute and fluffy. So I'm going to use my round brush. The round brush is the one that has kind of a point on it. And I'm going to come and work on the bottom of my penguin first. Now this gray, I can use it to go underneath my penguin and make a bit of a shadow so that you can tell the difference between his body and the mound of snow. Now, as I bring out this gray paint, I might have to go back in and grab some white and just kind of blend those two together. Do you see how if you put the white on top of the gray and kind of move it back and forth, it blends together? Just like that. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of gray underneath the sides of the black sides of his body. And then I'm going to do the same technique where I take my white paint and kind of blend the two together. Oops, if you go too far into his body, you might cover up some of the black, but that's okay. You can either put it back or just pretend like that was a happy accident and you meant to do it. Okay, taking white and putting it on top of the gray and just kind of blending it out into the snow. And there we go. I have some shadows on the bottom of my penguin. Now he looks like he's sitting on the snow. Next, I'm going to take some of this gray and I'm going to add some details on Santa's hat. Now I want to add a little bit of water to my paint to make it a bit more transparent. And I'm going to add the details really on the sides or the edges of the Santa hat. Just putting on these little lines to make it kind of look fluffier. Do you see that? Do you see how it kind of makes it look like it's fluffy wool instead of just a white solid shape? Now remember, if you get too carried away, you just take white and cover back up what you feel like got a little out of control. Just like that, okay? So if you like the more blended look, then you can take the white and put it on top of the gray and it'll blend a little bit better. If you like just having these little gray lines, then you can put those in instead, okay? So you do what you like and what you think looks best. Okay, so I'm just gonna put a little bit more detail in on this gray hat, and then of course I gotta put some gray on his little floof ball. Make his floof ball look really fluffy. Okay, so after you are happy with the details, the shadow and the fluffiness on the Santa hat, you can move on to the red part of the Santa hat. Now make sure that your hat is dry. Mine is not. So mine might cause me some issues. If yours is dry, you won't have these same issues. We're going to take a little bit of the black paint and we're going to outline Santa's hat. So we're going to put that crease back in and I'm going to outline the edge going around his hat. And I'm also going to take just a little bit of the black and make it a little bit darker at the side where the tail of his hat connects to the floof ball. And there we go. Just like before, if you feel like you overdid it with any of the black paint, you can just take a little bit of the red and cover it up. Cover up the black paint with your red. Okay, I have my details. Guess what? We're just about finished. I bet you know what we need to do next. It's pretty obvious, right? Our penguin is missing a face. So I'm gonna let you catch up, get all of your details done, and then we're gonna move on to the face in the next step. Okay, we're on the very last step and we only have 2 more things to do. We need to do the face of our penguin and we need to put in some snowflakes. And both of those are pretty easy steps. We're going to use our round paintbrush and we're going to do the nose first. So the orange paint is what we're going to use for the nose. And I'm going to show you really fast how we're going to do that. We're going to put a dot. If you see that center line where his forehead kind of bows down, we're going to put a dot right there for the top of his nose and a dot right here for the bottom of the nose. Now I kept my nose pretty low so that I have plenty of room for the eyes. Then we're going to put a dot on either side, and that's going to be the diamond-shaped nose of our penguin. If I outline it really fast, then I will have the outline of my nose, and then I can come back in and fill it in solid with my orange paint. Okay. All right, I have my penguin's nose started. We'll come back in and do a few little details in just a moment, okay? But first, we need to swirl, tap, and dry our brush and turn our attention to the eyes. The eyes are going to be two little ovals, and I'm going to put them right where the mouth ends, okay? So right here and right here, right above his beak, right above the little dots of his beak. I'm going to take my black paint, and make sure you just have a little tiny bit of paint on your brush. If you have a glob of paint, if your paintbrush looks like this, that's bad. Stop, okay? Go back, wipe your paintbrush off on your palette, and only have a little bit of paint so you can control it. I'm going to outline first. And then I'm going to fill in. Now, as you're filling in, if you didn't do the best job outlining, I didn't, that's okay. You can kind of fix it as you go. Remember, if all else fails, stop, take a small brush, make sure it's nice and clean and a little wet, and go back and forth, and you can erase it just like you erase the chalk. But you have to do this while the paint is wet. It will not work if the paint is dry. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and paint that back in and finish my eye. I need two of them. And then once I have them painted in solid, I can move on to my next step. Okay, so I'm going to take just a little teeny tiny bit of black on my brush. If you need to, you might have to swirl, tap, and dry your brush and clean it off. And I'm going to outline his nose. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to tell that that's a beak. While I'm at it, I can also outline his feet if you want to. You don't have to. You can even put like little webbing in. This is an optional step. Okay, and then I'm going to swirl, tap, and dry my brush, and I'm going to switch it over to the back end or the butt of the brush, and I'm going to dip it in the white paint, and I'm going to put a little tiny dot in the bottom left corner of each eye, just like that. I'm also going to put on a little line of white on his beak, and then if you want to, you can also put a little line in the top right corner of his eye, and that will make a really nice line or a reflection light and make him look like a cute little penguin. Next, we're going to take the back end of our brush, grab some more white, and we're going to dot little snowflakes. Some of these little snowflakes can cross onto your bird, but most of them are going to be in the background, falling from the sky. Now, remember, this is your painting, so if you want to get a little bit more complex, you could take the front end of your brush and you could draw out little snowflakes. And maybe you don't do that to every single one, but you put little snowflakes on every other one, or 1 out of 10. Just to make it look super cute and festive. Okay, so keep dotting until you are happy with the amount of snow you have. And then, guess what? You're finished. You should pat yourself on the back. You did such a good job following directions and painting this Christmas penguin. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. See you all later. Thank you for watching this Garden City Arts program. Please help us thank our generous sponsors.